All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. This is the last of our third season of the Future of Urban AI, which has been focusing on generative AI and climate adaptation and resilience, as well as other AI-related topics. This has gone by so fast. I'm kind of stunned that we're here at the end already. I'm looking forward to where we take the conversation from here. I don't know. I think we did have a cliffhanger at the end of season two. I don't know if we'll have one for season three. Um, just to recap, we're here on November 13th with Tom Sanchez, who's a professor at Texas A&M University. All of the talks from season three are making their way to the Urban AI YouTube playlist that you can find here. I think we're like a week or two behind in getting them up, but they will be filling in. And all of season two and season one lectures are there as well. There's also a recap of the season two series that you can grab at this URL. And I expect we'll be producing a season three summary as well that we'll share with you as our plans come together. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Tom, who's in landscape architecture and urban planning department at Texas A&M, is going to close us out by, I think, really grounding the discussion, in how AI can be used to do better urban planning. So, Tom, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Let's see. Let me share my screen. Okay. So that's showing up.
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, good. Well, thank you again for the invitation to speak to in your series. I've been following along and looking at the topics that have been covered. Certainly fascinating topics around virtual intelligence, sensing systems, sustainable cities, data privacy, urban transit, these things. And there's just so many possible directions, I think. And I think that that's kind of the stage that we're at in I don't know if sorting out is the right term, but just trying to figure out kind of what's the right tool for the job. And so within planning, I've been talking to a lot of planners as well as other academics and researchers about, what do we teach our students and how do we know what are the right applications? And I think within the planning profession, that need to be responsive and to get the job done is very important. They don't have time to really kind of play around to figure out what they're going to use or what is appropriate, what's going to be most efficient and effective. And so that's kind of I think in relative to the other presentations, I think I'm maybe stepping back a little bit in terms of the basics. And I've been really looking at that question is how do we identify when we should be using AI and in the planning context. That's my focus. And so the mainly what I'm going to talk about is what I'm referring to as the AI functionalities. Kind of what are the areas that we, at least now, that we're seeing that AI, or what aspects of projects or questions or problems or however we're framing that, what aspects are we looking for to kind of get a hint that AI might be appropriate for that tool. And this is really for people that that haven't been using it a lot, which I'm finding. I've been at a couple of state APA chapters lately, and we're just starting to get familiar with it. We're starting to, I was going to say play with these tools, but I don't know if it's necessarily play, sometimes play. And so anyhow, with that, um, I wanted to put a graphic on the screen that was kind of communicated that right tool for the job, that tool selection. And so naturally, I went to ChatGPT for a little bit of assistance, and so choosing the right tool for the job was the theme. And here's the prompt that I used. I said, create an image that shows a variety of objects that could be attached to like a piece of wood. I was just using that as an example, including a screw, a hook, small piece of wood, a nail, all things that require some sort of tool to attach, that object to the wood. I said also include a banana as something obviously that wouldn't be a tool or, wouldn't be attached to the wood, obvious to us. And so this was the image I got, which was, I think, really kind of interesting. Some things that I recognize, some things that I don't recognize. And the hammer and the banana are there. But, I was kind of looking for something that, we've got some objects on there that look like screws. So I was looking for another tool. And so I said, great image, include a screwdriver. And so I got this, not really a screwdriver. I got a little bit of Salvador Dali in the image, so I'm not really sure where that influence came from. Some other kinds of, objects here, a multi-claw hammer, which I hadn't seen before, which I thought was kind of interesting. And so still no screwdriver. So I said, use the first image and add a screwdriver to the mix. And this was I thought truly fascinating from a creative standpoint. The banana with the drill, and I searched online and I found something close to a banana drill, but I don't think it was that's what it was called what it was called. But I thought, the first thought is what in the world, and the second thought for me is fascinating. How did it put, those objects together, kind of the concept of the drill, maybe related to a screwdriver, and the banana, which was kind of on the side, not necessarily a tool. And this is, I mentioned this, I think this is really interesting because I'm seeing this particularly with generative AI as an idea generator. It's like this is probably not an idea that I'm going to take and run with, but maybe it makes me think about something else that hadn't occurred to me. And so I thought this was a little bit fun. I still don't, there's still the concept of what's the task here and what's the right tool. So I mentioned I've at this point, and I really welcome feedback on this, and what I've identified as the 7 AI functionalities. Some of these aren't completely discrete or distinct from each other, but as we're looking at and I don't necessarily want to say problems. We don't just deal with problems, but as we deal with questions, um, for particularly for analysis purposes, what kinds of things lend themselves, what kinds of questions lend themselves to AI tools. And so so I'm just going to run through each of these briefly, and give a few examples, and hopefully that will give us some ideas or lead to some questions or being able to go into it a little more depth. So pattern recognition. And I think that we see this quite a bit with AI. We've kind of had the statistical tools to do this for quite a while. So whether it's trends in historic data or time series data, we're looking for some kind of regular trend that we can then use for prediction purposes, or we're looking for anomalies. Maybe some of these peak periods, these happen to correspond to AM and PM commute peaks. And what's interesting here is actually a midday peak for non-work trips. But anyhow, so we use this kind of visually to find what the pattern is, and then we'll use that in our analysis. And then others, if we've got spatial data, if we've got satellite imagery, aerial photography, we're looking for, say, patterns of change over time, where we've seen land use change. And typically we would correlate that with, some other features or locations, to say, is there some relationship? We built a new interchange or off ramp, or we changed the shape of the urban growth boundary. Did that have an impact on, were we accommodating growth, or did we induce growth? But anyhow, so we're using this to find and detect patterns. We also see this, the city of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, also working with the University of Alabama, is using computer vision, another kind of pattern recognition technology, to do some neighborhood conditions analysis. And so they've equipped many of their, I don't know if it's all, but many of their garbage trucks, which go out on their weekly routes and go down nearly every street, and kind of capture the conditions of the neighborhood. And so along with looking for kind of maybe dilapidated sort of kind of repair needs or code violations, or other kinds of needs, it could be potholes, it could be other things, that they're using this tool to then be able to recognize and map these locations. And in talking with them, they said their focus wasn't really on the code enforcement side, where they could fine people for some of these infractions, whatever it might be, as much as looking for opportunities to improve and invest in neighborhoods that have some issues. And I believe they've been working along with Habitat for Humanity as well, in terms of identifying neighborhoods or particular properties or locations for this purpose. So you can think of what this would be like if we tried to put this task on somebody that was doing the windshield survey. The person collecting the trash, I mean, is already doing enough. They're not going to be able to do it. So just this opportunity to not only recognize what's happening kind of in the area, but then being able to automatically code that along the way. So another example of patterns. And I think in planning, we've had this, we are about patterns. That's a big part of what we do. And although Christopher Alexander and his co-authors kind of, I don't know if, I think some of what what is it, 200 and some kind of patterns, some of them are kind of objects or features. I don't know if we'd necessarily call them patterns, but I guess that depends on your definition of pattern. But it is, these kind of objects, features, patterns that we see used again and again, that have kind of a language to them. And and also with Kevin Lynch with the 5 different um, and now I'm forgetting what the 5 are, but like the path, the node, the the cluster or the district and so forth, but 5 kind of generalized sort of patterns that we see recurring in urban areas that can be used or interpreted in different ways. And I think fascinating too is the work of Mandelbrot in patterns or in fractals and the work that he did. And I think that one of the really interesting aspects of that is that I think he taught a fair amount in finance. And so, and his work was used to find, in kind of trends, patterns in economic or financial behavior. And his concept of roughness, I thought was really kind of interesting too, as we think about planning. We could probably characterize several things that we see in planning, whether it's growth or change, decline, that we could look at as kind of a roughness or an indicator of, hey, this is something we need to look into further, or hey, maybe this represents an opportunity for us, or somehow it helps us identify these areas, these places, these groups of people that have, that are something we need to explore further in the planning process. We use AI to automate analysis tasks. So some of these things that we're doing kind of individually and as steps, kind of a sequence of things. This is just helping us put a few of these together, and also not just the sequence, but also maybe in some logic in it as well, where maybe we encounter something, we collect the data, we go through this model training, and then we find something, we perform the analysis, and we say, hey, we need to go back and get some more data about that, maybe to clarify, or maybe it's we didn't adequately sample it, whatever it might be. So automating these tasks, which is a lot of kind of what we're doing in coding. We're putting statements together to execute, whether it's different functions, or if it's logic, or if it's stepping through some kind of process. And I think learning coding, for me, was helped with kind of thinking through kind of a logical sequence of how to carry out a task. And I think that that's useful for planning students. Maybe they're not ever gonna code or program again, but I think the logic behind it and kind of understanding that, or knowing what's going on behind the scenes, is important. Certainly, uh, having access to large amounts of data. We know if we're using sensors throughout the city that are monitoring conditions, all day, all night, whatever it might be, and trying to bring these together as well. But lots and lots of data where I'm going to try to find a pattern, or I'm going to try to find a trend. And again, whether that's for trying to recognize a problem or something anomalous, or if that's identifying something, that might be an opportunity, or something that's working well. But anyhow, the thought of wow, I've got lots of data. How am I going to sift through this and make sense of it? Should be kind of an indicator that it's a candidate to use some kind of a AI tool with. And one of the examples we're seeing, like for instance, social media data being used so that cities can keep track of, hey, what are the citizens saying, or what are the residents saying about us? And so, I know there's several companies out there doing this, but this was an example from Zen City, who's been working with the city of Long Beach and scraping social media data and saying what's the word, what's being said about us. And so in this particular case, this is over a couple of year period. This was like 5 million some messages or interactions that were being analyzed. And a lot of that sifting, because it's getting rid of stuff that has nothing to do with what the city is looking for. Is what are the comments about us as a service provider and kind of how we're doing our job. And so, and certainly there's going to be a lot of other kind of mentions that have nothing to do with that. So that's a big part of what that analysis is doing. And I'll come back to this one, but the main idea of large amounts of data to work through. Making predictions, and again, we've been doing this for a long time as planners, trying to estimate what future conditions might be or thresholds. So whether that's working with kind of continuous data for populations or levels of activity, or working with discrete outcomes. And so along these scales. So if we're trying to classify or characterize kind of discrete outcomes or possibilities, we've got tools for doing that. And we're thinking about this really in the context of, millions, billions, if not trillions of observations that we're using. And where the real power is, and really the power in being able to look at all possible combinations and then understand what those recurring patterns are that we're seeing that we need to pay attention to. Decision support, so kind of merging some of these functionalities and helping us maybe at the enterprise level. So we've got multiple departments that are working with each other. We've got engineering and safety and planning and maybe social services or utilities working together. Which of those functions or departments could we be sharing data with, and what's that process, or to build a process so that we can share that data, protect, in cases where we have proprietary data or that shouldn't be shared. How do we kind of automate that process and as well as building scenarios, certainly the recommendations off of the systems, and being able to visualize the outcomes of our analysis, as well as kind of like I mentioned before, even visualizing maybe some potential scenarios or some potential alternatives, and showing that as part of our decision-making or recommendation process. And certainly language processing. And so we're working with lots of words, okay? We don't, I think pretty much gone are the days that, we put our intern in a room with all of the plans and documents and say, read through these and tell us what they say, or find, kind of some important themes or whatever, that might be. Along with, being able to capture what those words as data are from the public, and whether that's at meetings in person, online, other social media, other sources, but large amounts of data that we want to be able to go through. And well, and then back to that example that I had from the social media and the language processing. So being able to go through all of that data, and really with a focus on the topic, what topics are being mentioned, and then what's the sentiment. So we want to know kind of what's the theme that we're seeing, what's that distribution look like, as well as along with those topics, is it being is it in the context of, a positive statement or negative or neutral somehow? So this data from Long Beach, this was actually during the period of from those 5 million some messages or data points that were being analyzed. This was during the COVID years. And so most of the comments that they detected had to do with public health. So things like, where do I get a shot? Where do I get a test? Where do I get information about, about COVID was at the was at the top of the list in terms of the topics being detected. And then language processing, lots of word. How do we make meaning from that? And certainly large language models are giving us access to these tools. And one kind of interesting example, I think, and this is more along the lines of idea generation, and David Bowie actually, used a tool called a verbicizer, to get ideas. And you think of a creative like David Bowie, and he was using, this tool, not a high level of kind of computational intelligence behind it, but still just that, being able to generate some alternative patterns and say, hey, that gives me an idea. And I wanted to, let's see if, so this is it. And so we can load in these separate columns with data. You can put your own data in there, or I can load the current headlines. And yeah, so obviously Elon Musk is there, Israel, Russia, all of these other things. And then the verbicize function here will take those and kind of scrambles them, kind of, randomly puts these together. And then you can, kind of read through these and create some lyrics, create some kind of ideas that maybe are a twist on, maybe what you could have thought of on your own. But I thought just just kind of an interesting example. We think of the large language models. This isn't very, really that, intelligence, but as a tool and kind of what it's able to do and maybe plug into our process, I think is interesting. Let me go back to.
Yeah, Tom, I'm not sure. I don't know if you switched applications. We were still seeing the same slide.
Okay. I'm gonna stop and then start again real quick. I only have a couple slides left.
Sure.
Okay. So working with words, and we see some, I think, some incredible opportunities there for planners in working with reports, working with documents, working with code, and we're seeing some real interest in being able to build chatbots and use these tools like large language models for knowledge management purposes. How can we use all of these regulations, historical reports about kind of where we've been, and pull information from those for as part of our plan making process. So kind of a easy application area to identify. And then optimization tasks, where kind of thinking about the kind of the classical traveling salesman problem. How can we visit each of these locations with the shortest path in mind as kind of as a measure of resource use? How can we minimize that, or maybe how can we maximize that, depending on what we're doing, if we're talking about travel time or if we're talking about service delivery or resource allocation among these points. And these could be points in time, points in space, um, as well as looking across multiple dimensions, like we're seeing with these surfaces, trying to find optimal sorts of solutions, which again, a lot of that having to do with looking at all possible combinations across, beyond three and four dimensions, but and being able to use these tools to kind of process things and hopefully visualize them as well in ways that we just haven't, been able to do before, either computationally or visibly. So so the optimization task, and I think and so let's see. Okay, so before I jump to that last slide on my conclusions, I was going to go back to ChatGPT and say, help me sum up. Help me think about this idea of selecting the right tool for the job, and maybe perhaps have a little bit of a warning in it. There is some concern about AI tools on a variety of fronts, as far as what it means for decision making and and plan making and in the public realm, certainly. So I kind of hesitated to show this, but this is what I got. So here was the prompt: create a photorealistic picture warning someone not to hit their thumb with the hammer. That was kind of the theme that I wanted to get out there. And how it interpreted, well, this person isn't going to hit their thumb with the hammer, but they're going to put the nail through the finger. They're going to injure themselves otherwise, and probably worse. Not to mention the fact that their fingers are kind of switched around here. But I was looking to this artificial intelligence to help me, kind of put a warning figure together. And I would say I probably would not use this. Um, uh, and then finally, couple of resources. I've got a PAS report that's a kind of a primer on artificial intelligence for urban planning, really kind of some basics to think about, as well as a recent article on some ethical issues, which I didn't go into at all here. And yeah, so yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Looks like we've got a couple questions feeding into the channel. Maybe we'll start with Nancy Minogue first. Nancy, I don't know, do you want to come on camera and ask your question, or would you like me to? That's good. Why don't
I read Nancy's question, if you want me just to
yeah, no, go for it.
kind of respond to that. So
Hi.
Nancy,
Yeah, sure.
oh,
Go
okay.
ahead. I couldn't figure out how to get on camera, but I mostly just wanted to
Big deal.
know if there are any trends like with the adoption of AI tools amongst urban planning practitioners, because I hear a lot of conversations within academia,
Yeah.
and there is more of a readiness to, take on AI tools and things like that. But I work in a consultancy, an urban planning consultant, with an urban planning consultant, and often it's harder to get people to use those tools because of like ethical issues or data privacy issues or just resource issues. So if you have come across like some kind of argument to convince them to adopt those tools, I'd be really interested to know that.
Yeah. And mostly what I've been seeing is kind of experimentation at this point. But it kind of happening maybe a little bit quicker in areas, again, where we've got lots of data, maybe where we have prior uh, uh, technical analyses, things like areas like transportation, where we've got lots of data. It's an optimization problem. So that is, for routing and for stop placement and things like that, we're seeing that. Also, some work being done in the area of wildfires and wildfire predictions. Saw a great presentation recently about what's happening in California, and certainly for risks generally and hazards. Um, the interesting aspect of that too is what the insurance companies, how they are being involved with those prediction levels and what that means in terms of loss or liability. For hazards. So mostly at this point, it's been kind of, just starting to get familiar with it. Maybe kind of the engineers, the other technical kind of areas are picking up on it a little bit quicker. Um, the and actually today, about midday, depending on where you are, the city of Los Angeles is talking about their AI applications. So they've got a webinar that's appearing. So I'm really looking forward to them to see if what they're doing kind of on an enterprise level. So I'm always looking for these examples. And then you mentioned in your question about the uh, overcoming the friction. Yeah, and there's obviously still concerns about this data privacy, confidentiality, and these things being a big part of that. And we've seen places like Boston putting together guidelines for how they're going to approach AI tools, data, communications with the public. So I think we're really kind of at the, fairly early stages in learning about it. So hopefully everybody's kind of sharing their experiences so we can, be, all learning from each other.
Great, thanks. Shafan had a question. Maybe, I don't know if you wanted to come on and ask. Yeah, basically the question was, the AI functionalities that you overviewed, Tom, are mostly about analysis. And the question is, what about advocacy and engagement, negotiation, all the other things that planners do? Is AI part of the picture there?
Yeah, great point, because I mainly come from a kind of an analysis perspective. Yeah, what about negotiation? What about communications? And I think we're seeing some examples or discussion about community involvement, um, and if that's related to scenario building and being able to communicate that, being able to capture what the comments are, or the needs or preferences are related to that, and then being able to understand, what are we hearing, and what of that can feed into the plan making process, and whether that's part of changing a design, adding to a design, accommodating something, as part of that plan. I think that's really kind of important, and I think lots of potential. So yeah, I'm glad that was mentioned, because that is obviously kind of a key element of the planning process. How can we be more representative? How can we be more inclusive? How can we communicate that people are being heard, that stakeholders are being heard in that process, and how do we then reflect that? So, we've been working on that for a long time, just trying to get, how do we get uh, how do we get more people involved in the process? How do we get more of our, of the people from our community to know about the process, participate, in the process, and feel like they are, that this is uh, that's an important element of the process. And so we're still, yeah, it's a challenge.
I'm curious, Tom, like how some of this is starting to get translated into like requirements for planning education, either like what the research faculty are like thinking needs to be taught, what you're hearing from students about what they want in terms of skills and just exposure to tools and some of these uncertainties around them.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I know some schools are further ahead than others, but most of what I've been seeing is kind of just a beginning of that conversation. How do we accommodate this in the classroom in an equitable way? How do we provide the training as far as the ethical considerations around this, and what do those processes look like? And I kind of look at it as like we typically do in research, where we cite our sources and other ideas that we're incorporating that aren't ours. We try to attribute you know where we got those from, and that's kind of where I'm at with this right now. If you can use this tool for your coursework, say you used it. I know you used a spell checker. I know you probably used a grammar checker. As kind of maybe some simpler examples of AI. And I think a lot of our students are becoming familiar with the large language models for generating text. So again, we're still at the beginning stages of that, of how to work that out. And I do hear from some faculty, absolutely not going to be
Yeah.
in the classroom. And I kind of, think about that as like the scientist saying, no, I don't want a fast calculator. No, I don't want that supercomputer to supercharge my calculations. And it's like, if we're working with, and this is on the generative side, but if we're working with words, if we're working with all these other kinds of analyses, whatever, it might be, I'm thinking this is going to be, it's this, we're gonna be using these things. So let's figure out what the rules are.
Yeah, no, I had a conversation about a month ago with one of our AI faculty here at Cornell who works on natural language processing, and he was very adamant the killer app for these technologies is reading at scale. And so I'm doing an experiment next semester. These aren't planning students; they're engineering students, but we read city technology plans, and we usually do case studies of individual plans, do a deep read on it, and talk about it. And I'm considering in the spring doing a totally different approach, which is to have them read 200 or 300 city technology plans with an LLM and analyze the whole thing, like the whole corpus.
Right.
And it's a very, very different kind of case study of urban plans, but I think it's something that wasn't feasible without these tools. And I'm kind of curious what the insights are going to be and what they might learn.
Yeah, and over the last weekend, I saw a few presentations on analyses like that for plan evaluation, and still that process. Yes, it generated the topics and with some level of frequency, but there was still some ground truthing that needed to be, and some that person going back and saying, did they, was that really talked about? And having to go back. So I think, that that evaluation, that checking, is still going to be needed. Kind of the use of the tool, the interpretation of the results, and all that. There's still um, the one interesting thing related to that is that I hear is, well, you need to have a human involved in that evaluation process, and I think so we can reintroduce the bias. So I say that tongue in cheek, but it's like you need to have the humans look back at that and evaluate it and see if that's really what we meant. But we all carry kind of our own perspectives and and biases. So you give that document to a handful of people, you're going to get a variety of results. And what do we do? Do we take the average of that? How do we decide? But anyhow, my point being that yeah, we have the tools to really go through lots and lots of data, but then where's the quality control? Where's the critical thinking that has to be applied to that to say, well, no, this isn't, just like we would with any of our colleagues.
Yeah.
I hear something from a colleague who I know and I respect, and comes out, that wasn't exactly true what they told me.
Yeah.
Or family members, they tell me things that aren't true all the time, and so there's still going to be we've got a lot of the uh, paying attention is a big part of all this.
So I think we may have found our cliffhanger, which is by the time we reconvene next year, we're likely to have witnessed the first kind of LLM enabled faceplant in urban planning, where someone produced a result that was put into action that was never, double checked by a human being. So keep your eyes out for it. We can, share those, learn from them. But I want to thank Tom, thank all of our speakers who have joined us this season. And thank everyone who's come to participate and ask great questions. We'll be, again, pushing all of this to YouTube over the next week or two, and getting some written summaries pulled together and shared out in a report. If folks have ideas for topics or speakers or other kinds of conversations that they want to continue from here, we'd love to hear about them. You can send them to Bear or to myself. Or share them in the Urban AI Slack. Thank you very much, and so long.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.